Hello, and welcome back to It's a Very Exciting Time, a podcast by a UFO nerd and his tolerant friend. My name is Scott, and I've been fascinated by the phenomena my whole life.
And my name is Chuck. I'm an aerospace nerd and a tolerant friend.
We started this podcast because since 2017, there have been shocking revelations, from news of secret Pentagon programs to confirmed Navy video of astonishing craft. In a nutshell, now that the government has admitted that UFOs are real,
or at least that the videos were authentic.
it raises the natural question. If UFOs are real, what else? Suddenly, some of these other parts of the phenomenon that seemed unlikely are pulled into the realm of the possible.
Right? And they may still be unlikely. There's so many explanations for these stories. Even if the truth is more mundane than we're hoping, if any of this turns out to be true,
whoo, it's a very exciting time. All right. It's been a while, Chuck.
Yeah,
what have you been up to? It's been like, 3, 4, 7, 12
years?
weeks? Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, it's, I don't know. It's been a lot. I think I don't know.
So I sat down to do the notes like I normally do, and it took quite a bit longer than usual.
Oh,
it's been an eventful few weeks, to the point where I'm having to add a new segment to the podcast. Ooh. Yeah, this is quick hits.
Does it have a audio prompt as well?
Oh man, I don't know. Here's the thing. You're like, oh, Scott always says all right, or Scott says let's get weird with it. I don't realize I'm doing those things.
Yeah, I know.
You'll
That's
tell
part of
me
why I love it.
After the fact if there's something I'm doing. But yeah, quick hits. These are things that have happened that someone who's listening to our podcast might be like, ooh, I wonder if they're going to talk about this thing. And the short answer is, no, we're not. We don't have enough time to get into it, but it was worth mentioning. So we got a couple of these things real fast. First of all, Chuck, did you know that the Mexican Congress held a UAP hearing and they revealed alien bodies?
Oh,
I know.
No, I did not. That's exciting.
Very exciting. However, these alien bodies are actually very small mummies that are from Peru. They were possibly illegally smuggled out. There's some international scandal going on there. The guy who presented them is a TV personality named Jamie Maussan. I may be brutally mispronouncing his name. Apologies. But he's a bit of a controversial figure. In fact, he has done this before. He brought out supposedly mummified UFO alien bodies and got in trouble when, hey, they turned out not to be. So the credibility rating on this story is already in the floor. It's not great.
So is this the guy who Gary Nolan debunked?
No, that was Stephen Greer. But very similar vibe. Lots of people have been pointing that out. Here's the thing that's weird. If you look at any photos of these bodies, they look so fake. They're so weird looking. And the internet has been tearing itself apart over this. And here's the thing. My gut says it's fake. This dude's involvement makes it seem fake. They look fake. Nothing about it feels real. But there's just enough to cling on to. And the people I trust are being very non-determinative about it. They're like, I don't know. There just isn't enough information to tell. There's plenty of marks against it, but there are also people who have looked at the CAT scans and been like, no, actually, there's no indication this is fake. There are other people who have done studies and they're like, it's obviously a llama skull. So we're not getting into it now. There's a whole thing here. It's probably fake, but it's also not going away the way I would expect a quick scandal, like, oh, this dude dragged out a couple of mummies to make a buck. Like, people are still talking about it a couple of weeks later. So anyway, we will probably talk about it at some point when I have the time to do proper research and look into it. For now, just know something weird happened in Mexico with Peruvian, maybe alien mummies, and
amazing.
It's probably fake.
I personally, I love the idea of trying to explain to like some tired medical person why, like, why exactly do you need to load a mummy into their CT scanner? Like,
right. And like a really fake looking mummy too. Like,
yeah,
like
right.
It looks like a kid made it, you know? It's like, really?
Is this Halloween? Come on. What's happening here?
Also, our favorite whistleblower, David Grush, dropped a new interview. It's like an hour long. It's on YouTube.
Okay.
I'll be perfectly honest with you. I haven't watched it.
Yeah, okay. Me either.
But it dropped a couple of weeks ago, and Reddit is pretty good about if any new claims pop up going nuts about it. I haven't seen anyone going nuts about it. It seems, my gut check is he's kind of just going into a little more detail about all the same claims he's already made. It's worth watching. I will watch it. However, I pulled it from the notes this week because there is a second documentary interview dropping with him like tomorrow or really, really soon. So it didn't make any sense for me to dive into it. I will wait. We'll probably talk about it next show if something happens. But anyway, David Grush has been out making the rounds, which is interesting because last time we talked, he had been kind of incommunicado for a while since the whole scandal with his run-ins with the law and his PTSD breaking and that whole hubbub. So it's good to see him out and about. Yeah,
that's great. Fire up the popcorn machine. Sounds like a great evening watching like multiple Grush interviews.
Right. And last of all, in our quick hit section, I've got a little note here. Are government agencies getting ready for disclosure?
Oh my God.
And, I will fully admit you can apply Betteridge's law here. Anytime a newspaper headline contains a question, you can answer it with the word no. But there have been a couple of odd things that have happened. Both the Department of Energy and notably Customs and Border Protection put up like UFO information on their websites kind of unprompted. The DOE put up a couple of like reports of weird UFO encounters at DOE facilities, which was just weird because nobody asked them to do it. It just kind of happened. The Customs and Border Patrol one was very strange because they released like a trove of documents and a bunch of videos. The videos are kind of, some of them could be something. Some of them are like, that's pretty clearly a drone. It kind of feels like someone at Border Patrol, like their pet project, but it's weird because it landed on their official website. Like they basically have like a UFO section now. And Reddit's reaction to both of these is obviously what's happening is the Schumer amendment with the disclosure bill is about to pass and they're getting preemptively ready. They're going to have to do this anyway. It takes time. So they've been getting out in front of it, which I don't like. What's your take on that, Chuck? A government agency proactively adding a section to their website?
They've always been pretty obsessed with aliens anyways, so.
All right, nice play on words. Yeah, I don't find this idea compelling at all.
Yeah, it's weird.
Especially after everything we learned about the painstaking process they had to go through to get a one-page website up for AARO. No. I don't buy it. But I mean,
that's not
it's
really
weird.
What's happening there. Yeah.
But I don't know what's happening. Like, why would they put these up? Like, it feels like we have to fight tooth and nail to get the government to share anything about UFOs. And then they just throw this stuff up on a whim. Like, so I don't know. There's probably a story there. For the moment, it's just an interesting footnote. Like, hey, there were some UFO videos put up on the Border Patrol website. That's weird.
Yeah. Were they any good?
No.
No. Okay. Great.
Total mixed bag. I don't know, man.
All right,
they might be drones.
Maybe people will find some.
If there's any agency that I would expect to run into weird stuff, it's Customs and Border Patrol.
Oh, yeah.
We know the cartels in Mexico are constantly trying every insane thing you can think of. I've heard about them building submarines There are stories about them like using surfers to surf out around the border wall with drugs like strapped to their surfboard. They dig tunnels. Like, of course they have weird drones. They would be trying anything. So it doesn't seem weird to me that the Border Patrol would be like, hey, we saw a weird thing flying around here.
Well, if anyone's going to find it, Reddit will. So
Reddit will.
Give it some time.
All right. So that's the end of Quick Hits. You will probably hear more about that stuff in the future, but for now, I just kind of wanted to note that these things had happened. So let's get to our favorite recurring segment, House UAP Gossip Corner.
Ooh, gossip.
Yep, our favorite friends have been at it again. Representative Luna has been a little bit quiet lately because she's on maternity leave, but before she left, she dropped that they are, wait for it, still working on getting a skiff to talk to David Grush.
Excellent.
And other than that, we got Representative Burchett, who's been on a warpath since he's been back after the August recess. He says that Speaker of the House McCarthy promised him another UAP hearing. This is a big bit of news because last we had heard it had been shut down. No more UAP hearings. Yeah, right. They're embarrassing to the DOD was the line that we
You're right, yeah.
We wrote this
the
up
dainty
earlier,
DOD.
Oh, no. What'd someone think of the DOD?
Yeah.
So yeah, McCarthy says they're getting another UAP hearing. That's great.
Okay.
But big caveat there. Burchett says McCarthy told him that they were denied the UAP Select Committee. This was going to be the thing where they got subpoena power and were maybe going to do a church-style commission, and Burchett was going to really get out there and force people to tell him what to do, or they were going to apply the Holman Rule, all kinds of stuff. Burchett says they were denied, quote, because guys in intelligence were getting their feathers ruffled. They weren't getting any love.
Okay. Any particular people in intelligence, or?
I will admit, when I heard this quote, I just assumed he was talking about the intelligence community.
Yeah, right.
It turns out, we'll find out in this next quote, he's referring to the House Intelligence Committee, which is a different group that he's not part of.
Okay.
So Burchett said, this next hearing, it's going to be government. We've had the whistleblower witnesses. Now we're going to get the government in. That's what I want to do.
Is he talking about like ICIG or?
That's the assumption.
Idea?
Yeah.
Okay.
In the context at the time, he was asked, the one that he mentioned was getting, little spoiler alert here, we're going to talk about NASA later. They announced a new director of UAP studies, but at the time they hadn't announced that person's name yet. And Burchett was mad about it. He was like, we're going to haul that person in. We're going to get them in front of the committee. So yeah, Burchett wants to get government witnesses up on the stand. The ICIG would be a logical one.
Okay.
In fact, we'll talk about the ICIG in a second. Like the next day, there's this one guy, by the way, I haven't talked about him on the show because he does such a good job of producing little quotes, but there's this journalist named Matt Laszlo. He runs a website called Ask a Poll, like ASKAPOL, like Ask a Politician.
Okay.
And as far as I can tell, all he does is catch politicians in the hallway and ask them a UFO question. All of his interviews are like 2 minutes long, carried out while walking between locations. But he is absurdly good at getting politicians to like say something to him and turn it into a little story. We quote his stories all the time. So it occurs to me I should probably give him a little love. So anyway, like the next day after that Burchett quote, Matt Laszlo was talking to Representative Himes, who is the top Democrat on the House Intel Committee. And when Laszlo asked him about UFO stuff, he said there has been no discussion of UAP at all. Okay. I don't know. Anytime... This comes back to our tech background, right? Like in tech, if you're looking at analytics and you see either 100% or 0%, both of those numbers are wrong. Something has gone terribly wrong.
Yeah,
I don't know what it is. Nothing is ever all or nothing. So part of my instinct is like, really? No discussions? Yeah. I believe that it's not a priority. But like nobody's talking about this. Has been a
nobody's
big, like, yeah. So whatever. Okay. He says no discussion of UAP at all. The next day, Laszlo gets Burchett again, and Burchett says, you know, it's odd they would say that when I was told by the speaker that that was the reason we couldn't have a select committee was because we stepped on their toes. In this case, theirs being the intelligence committee that Representative Himes is on. Like, oh, okay, got it. So Burchett is very strongly implying that he's been told that the House Intelligence Committee is gearing up for a big UAP showdown. And they're a little salty that Burchett and Luna have been out there like pounding the drum and stealing their thunder. And that's why they shut down the House stuff. So who knows? It's all Burchett, but we'll see.
I love Burchett. He lives for drama, and I'm for it.
He's a messy bitch, as they say on the internet.
Exactly.
So I mentioned the ICIG and I mentioned Burchett. You might remember back in August, the House UAP gang, Representatives Burchett, Luna, Moskowitz, and a few others, they sent a letter to the ICIG. And it was a short letter, but they were basically just asking for information about UFO programs. And, it was phrased in a little more official way, but basically, hey, as a result of talking to Grush, you investigated this stuff. Tell us where the UFOs are at. Now, nobody really knew what to make of this, and people on Reddit were very quick to point out the ICIG has zero responsibility to respond to this letter. It was a request. He could have 100% ignored it. But of course, everyone was kind of, the letter had a deadline. It was like, please get back to us by such and such a date. And as that date approached, everyone was like, ooh, the ICIG only has 7 days to respond. Like, okay, whatever. So anyway, the ICIG did write back. If you had to guess, did the ICIG reveal explosive details like where the UFOs are kept in a letter to Burchett?
Like weasel words, 100%.
Yep, the ICIG wrote back and he said, sorry, did I say what ICIG stands for? Or are we doing the thing where we're barreling over an act? Intelligence Community. I don't think you did. Intelligence Community Inspector General. Sorry about that. The Inspector General wrote back and he said, after a lot of like paragraphs of like, we take our responsibilities very seriously here, he finally got around to saying that it has, quote, not conducted any audit, inspection, evaluation, or review of alleged UAP programs within the responsibility and authority of the DNI that would enable this office to provide fulsome response to your questions.
Ooh. Fulsome. That's going to be my word of the day.
Yeah, right. You know it's good when they break out a $5 word to shut you down.
Yeah, absolutely.
As you can guess, Burchett was not happy with this response. He got on Twitter. He said, the ICIG office did nothing to look into the information they received from David Grush on UAP crash retrieval programs. They have no information they can give to Congress. Cover up.
Oh my God. So this is why you kept sending me the Burchett cover-up GIF randomly yesterday.
Dude, this guy's my favorite. Like, nothing happens in Washington that is not part of a conspiracy with him. It happens that in this case, his conspiracies are aligned with mine. So I'm happy to quote him. But yeah, I will readily admit this is his default state of being, that everyone in the world is actively suppressing and working against him.
Yeah. I wonder if there's always like a token person in Congress that's like, it's a cover up.
Right. Now, here's the thing. The ICIG says they didn't look into Grush. Burchett thinks it's a cover-up. Any reasonable person, I think, would probably read this and go, it's probably not a cover-up.
Yeah.
And there were some posts that came out pretty quickly after this that talked about the ICIG, and I'm going to preface all of this by saying, again, I am not a politician. I do not work in the government. I don't know any of this stuff. I only know what I read on Reddit.
Right.
that they were pointing out that, like, there was a period of weeks from when Grush came to the ICIG and when they sent their urgent and credible letter to Congress. So the depths of the investigation may not have been very rigorous, and maybe that's what he means. Well, it will not surprise you to find out that someone got extremely pedantic with what all of these words mean. And it will not surprise you to learn that there are differences legally between audits, inspections, evaluations, reviews, etc. So Matthew Pines, who is the director of intelligence at Krebs Stamos Group, points out that the ICIG has engaged in a little bit of wordplay here, a fun little bit of wordplay. He says, quote, "The ICIG states that it has not conducted an audit, inspection, evaluation, or review of the alleged UFO programs. Note, the official taxonomy for ICIG activities includes audits, investigations, inspections, and reviews. It's curious that investigation was not denied."
Yeah. Hey, Scott, do you hear that? That scratching and snuffling noise?
No, I don't hear anything. What's up?
Oh, yeah, here it is. Hang on. Okay, let me pull this lid off this box. Yeah, yep, there it is. It's a politician who's gotten trapped in a box like a ferret. Here, I'll hold him up to the mic. If you listen carefully, you can hear it. Dun, dun, dun. Weasel words.
It's amazing. He keeps getting trapped in your particular office.
I know. I don't know how this happens all the time.
So Matthew Pines goes on and he explains in a bit more detail that all these words, although you and I might use them as synonyms, have very particular meanings. He says each word has a specific and formal bureaucratic meaning with references to different types of ICIG activities. Those different activities are handled by different divisions in the ICIG's office. Specifically, an audit or inspection is different than an investigation, which is the most serious of its activities and is triggered by whistleblowers and is covered by a specific statutory authority. Oh. So, he concludes, they went out of their way to stipulate each kind of activity they are not conducting and just didn't mention one of the ones that they do handle. He says, quote, "There is an art form to the non-denial denial in DC."
Can I just say, this shit is so exhausting. I know some people live for this, but I hate having to second guess literally everything.
Oh, 100%. It pushes you so easily into a conspiratorial mindset.
Yeah.
You know, like, I don't like having, we've referred to Kremlinology before. Like, you can't take anything at face value, which leaves you constantly parsing for hidden meanings and unspoken messages. And it's not a big leap to get from here to like full-on Q conspiracy territory. And it kind of worries me, frankly. Yeah. Like, I don't like doing this, but it's really hard to ignore that we know that they did investigate his claims to some degree, perhaps not for very long. And now here they are, very deliberately, it appears, leaving out one of the key offices in the ICIG when they mention all the things they were not doing. Now, even then, I don't think I would have put a whole lot of stock in this, except Chuck McCullough, who was the first Intelligence Community Inspector General and is, notably, now David Grush's personal attorney.
No.
He has said in the past that inspector generals are very reluctant to talk to legislators because, quote, Congress leaks like a sieve.
Yeah, absolutely can't blame him. I think at some point we're gonna see like Burchett sprinting out of the skiff straight to the news studio, like, y'all are never gonna believe what I just heard.
Yeah, I could totally see that happening. Yeah, like I don't blame an ICIG for not wanting to leak secrets to the body most likely to leak them. But as an outsider, God, I hope that's exactly what happens.
Right? Yeah, exactly.
I will totally take disclosure from Burchett
By
telling
accident.
me the shit that he was not supposed to say out loud.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, man. So that's the House gossip corner.
Okay.
We don't have as much gossip about the Senate, right? They're a slightly more together and formal professional body. They take their job a little more seriously. But that said,
fewer of them.
there's less opportunity for drama. That said, the Senate has been back almost as long as the House, and they've been getting into it also. Notably, multiple senators have made trips to AARO to impress on Dr. Kirkpatrick just how important it is to protect whistleblowers. Now, you might remember in a couple of episodes now, we've talked about this persistent rumor we're hearing that there are more whistleblowers in the wings, but they don't trust AARO. They don't trust AARO, both because it's situated under Ronald Moultrie, who has historically penalized whistleblowers, but also because Dr. Kirkpatrick doesn't seem to take whistleblower testimony seriously at all. A bunch of people have testified to him, and he then goes before Congress and says, nope, haven't heard anything. It's really quiet out here.
So why does Senate care about like whistleblower protection is very important, but if that's not the problem that's stopping people from whistleblowing to AARO, why are they impressing this?
Well, I think that is part of the problem. Like, part of the problem is Kirkpatrick doesn't take what he hears seriously. But the other part of the problem is that whistleblowers are apparently afraid to go to AARO, that they will experience consequences in their professional careers, that shit will be leaked, right? Like, we talked about David Grush's personnel file being leaked to the press as pretty clearly looking more like a warning shot at other whistleblowers than an actual attempt to smear Grush. So anyway, real briefly, we've got a few senators here. Back in July, Senator Rounds had a classified briefing with AARO Director Kirkpatrick, during which he pushed for better whistleblower protections, asked about it recently by Matt Laszlo. He said, I think it's a matter of participation by individuals who are concerned about the ability to be protected if they went to AARO. And so I think that's going to be the challenge, is making sure that people who may have had any firsthand knowledge or wanted to share any information can do so.
Is that something Kirkpatrick can even do anything about?
Yes, Kirkpatrick has a legal responsibility to it. This is one of the things, right? Like, legally, whistleblowers are supposed to be protected.
Yeah.
And if a department is not careful, a whistleblower can get in trouble. Like, this is Grush's whole complaint, is that he went to the DOD IG and his details leaked and there were reprisals that he suffered. All of that shit is supposed to be anonymous. So that is the fear here, is that AARO is not going to do a good job of protecting witnesses. So they're going back and reminding him, like, yo, this is your job. We're hearing from witnesses that they don't trust you. You need to straighten this up and be better.
Got it. Okay.
Senator Warner, who is the chair of the Senate Intelligence Committee, says, every whistleblower the committee's treated with respect and fully heard out. Vice Chairman Rubio and I have met recently with Dr. Kirkpatrick and reiterated our belief that this is a really serious topic and needs to be treated that way. Senators don't just randomly meet with people and tell you something is important. They're doing that because they think you're not taking it seriously.
Yeah.
He says, also, this is the first time that the federal government has put resources and scientific heft behind this effort, and we are absolutely very closely monitoring it. Again, this was not a blanket statement of support. AARO's got this. We don't worry about it. Talk to AARO. They're saying, yeah, this is serious, and we are actively watching what they're doing. This is a guy who's under direct supervision of Congress to make sure he does what he's supposed to do. And most recently, Senator Gillibrand, UFO Mama Bear herself, says that all of these meetings with AARO about whistleblowers are not a coincidence. She says, these claims are very serious, and I take them all very seriously, and I want to make sure that our service members know they can come forward and disclose all projects they have worked on. And it's important that the whistleblower community feels comfortable talking to AARO so that AARO can do its job thoroughly. If whistleblowers don't come forward, AARO can't assess their claims and can't find programs that they're talking about. So there's Gillibrand kind of bringing it back around to what you're talking about. Like, okay, well, if they don't trust AARO and the whistleblowers are going straight to the ICIG and Congress, why is that a problem? Well, part of the problem is Gillibrand and others have been working with the DOD to do this properly so that it's not just, yo, Congress did this because the DOD wouldn't. That it's not just ICIG statements because the DOD wouldn't. The DOD is supposed to do this. They have a mandate to do this. So for Gillibrand especially, her kind of reputation is on the line. Like, yo, we told you to do this. And someone mentioned, we talked about back in, I think it was April, there was a Senate UAP hearing that was really just a few members of the Senate, including Gillibrand, meeting with Dr. Kirkpatrick. And there were a lot of questions in there like, do you have the resources to do your job? And we gave her the nickname UFO Mama Bear at the time because it felt very protective. Like, are you getting everything you need? Because I will fight for you. But someone pointed out there's another way to read that, which is, do you have the resources to do your job? Like, because I won't hear any excuses from you about how you can't do your job because you don't have the resources. She's setting a clear expectation. You have a job. You have a mandate. I don't care what, like barriers you're facing. You're going to do this job.
Right.
So I don't know, man. I think it's interesting. Obviously nothing has come of this yet. It's just a bunch of senators talking. But what I see here, the through line, is, again, senators who, of any branch of Congress, I guess there's only two, compared to the House, you would expect senators to be a little bit more concerned about their political image. And if there is a group out there that I would expect to be more comfortable passing the buck and not making statements, it would be senators. I would expect them to be like, talk to AARO. That's their deal. This is a DOD question. But no, we're hearing over and over and over from a bunch of different senators. This is serious. This is a big deal. We care that whistleblowers are taken care of. We are not backing off on this. We are not relenting. This is not going away.
Yeah. I have to say, though, at this point, like, if I were a whistleblower, I'm not sure I'd know where to go. It doesn't seem like any like with what we talked about with ICIG. I don't know that I would be able to parse that as an individual without Twitter and all that. And we know DOD IG is no good. We know AARO is ineffective. Like, I think I would be waiting for to see some like real action happening from Grush first.
100%. And that's what we've been hearing the whole time, right? That all of these whistleblowers were waiting to see what happened with Grush. Now, it's interesting you mentioned that because until recently, that was pretty much all we heard, that there were more whistleblowers waiting in the wings. And we'd heard vague statements from Ross Coulthart and a few others that more whistleblowers have given testimony, but it was unclear how many or when or where or what timeline this had happened on. By some estimates, Congress has been on this since David Grush first came to them 2 years ago, which kind of raises the question, well, where are they now? Anyway, journalist Michael Schellenberger published a new article claiming that, quote, at least 30 other whistleblowers working for the federal government or government contractors have given testimony or a protected disclosure to the Office of the Intelligence Community Inspector General and the Defense Department Inspector General, or to Congress directly over the last several months, according to multiple sources.
There are dozens of us.
Never one to let an opportunity to reference Arrested Development pass.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, apparently there are literally dozens of whistleblowers who have now come forward. Now, you'll note that he said they have come forward to the ICIG, the DODIG, and to Congress directly. He did not mention AARO. So
Yeah.
I think you're right that the whistleblower vibe right now is they don't know who to trust.
Right.
And the only route they have seen whistleblowers apparently being taken seriously is the ICIG and Congress. And they appear to be taking that path rather than AARO. Now, also, the AARO has not exactly been making it easy to get a hold of them, having zero public contact methods. But, you know, presumably they could have gotten in touch with them if they needed to.
Yeah.
Mick West, who there's one person out there on Twitter who makes the point every time they mention it. Mick West, former computer game programmer and UFO skeptic. And I love it because it's such a subtle way of throwing a little bit of shade at him. Like, when you just say he's a skeptic, you kind of assume he has like a scientific background or he knows what he's talking. No, he's just a computer programmer who thinks the topic is interesting. Anyway, Mick West, who, as much as I find him distasteful sometimes, does make some good points and does hold people's feet to the fire. His primary objection to David Grush this whole time has been that Grush is one guy and that his claims are not firsthand. Now, we've talked before about why we don't find that particular form of dismissiveness compelling, right? This is literally Grush's job, is to be an investigator, but I get it. I get why someone would think it's just one guy and he didn't see the stuff personally. Well, if there's 30 people saying it, that's a little different, right? And Mick West said, yeah, that would be very interesting. You know, more people saying the same thing independently makes it more likely to be true. Matthew Pines, who we talked about earlier, the security consultant guy, had a quote. He said, yeah, you know, it's either dozens of highly cleared officials are in the grip of an enduring, bizarre delusion, or they're witting participants to a broad scale and long-running psychological deception, or they're relaying factual information on extraordinary covert programs.
Yeah, I mean, crazy lying or telling the truth. But isn't giving false testimony a crime?
Yeah, and this is another reason why I find this compelling, right? Like, if I go on the news, I can say whatever the fuck I want. There might be some consequences, but you know, if I say that I worked in a UFO program and I didn't, like, nothing's really going to happen to me. But giving false testimony to the ICIG, that's punishable by fines up to $10,000, 5 years in prison, or both. And lying to Congress also carries a penalty of 5 years in prison. So Grush and all these others are facing some real serious penalties if it turns out they're just making shit up and telling tales out of school.
Yeah, so the elaborate prank hypothesis is probably out the window. Although I have always wondered, I think there's a prank elaborateness sweet spot where it's so big and so elaborate
that no one could believe it's a prank.
Yeah, right? It ceases being a prank and becomes sweet, sweet art instead.
It's like that scene in the movie, right, where the hero is meeting the villain in a bar or something, and the hero is getting ready to pull a gun on the villain, and the villain kind of like snaps his fingers, and the music stops, and every single person in the bar stops their discussion and pulls a gun, and you realize that no one in the bar is an actual patron. They're all in on it, you know?
Yeah. So maybe it's that.
Maybe it's the biggest practical joke ever played in history. Yeah. But, you know, like, I think it's telling that, like, this is where we're at, right? Like, in order to say that all of these people are lying or all of these people are crazy, you are having to go to increasingly bizarre lengths. And there is a contingent out there who believes that there is this very small group of noisy influencers, and let's be blunt here. They're talking about Chris Mellon and Lou Elizondo, who have been banging drums behind the scenes and getting people in Congress to take things seriously that they shouldn't be. And that allegation has been out there for a while. And I find it very compelling that the more witnesses come out, the more whistleblowers come out, the less you can cling to that idea. The more it's hard to get this idea that someone is misleading Congress. Like, you're telling me that 30 independent federal employees all decided to, and let's be clear, these are the ones who decided to testify. We're not saying there are 30 to 50 people working in the government on this. We're saying of everyone working in the government who is aware of these programs, these are the ones who looked at the situation with David Grush and all of the risks involved with becoming a whistleblower and decided, yeah, I'm doing that. I'm going to stick my career on the line.
Right. Like, yeah. It's like, if we learned anything from like #MeToo, that the first one is really hard, but then after that, like, so many more come piling in. And
yeah, totally. So I really focused so far on the idea that there were like 30 whistleblowers, which I do think is really important. But I don't want to ignore the article also had a brief throwaway paragraph near the end that was, by the way, here are the things the whistleblowers are claiming, which align pretty well with what Grush said, but go beyond in certain points. The article said, quote, testimony has included both first-hand and second-hand reports of crash retrieval and reverse engineering programs by U.S., Russian, and Chinese governments, the testing of materials obtained from retrieved craft, active and ongoing government disinformation operations, kinetic military action with UAPs. I believe that means we shot at UAPs. Kinetic means we fired guns. Contact and collaboration with non-human intelligence, and the successful reverse engineering of a triangle-shaped craft with unconventional propulsion.
Huh. Those are some wild claims. Like, how much, I haven't heard this person's name before. How much weight should we put behind this journalist?
Yeah, that's totally fair. We've talked about Schellenberger a handful of times. Schellenberger is better known for his efforts on the Twitter files, where Elon Musk was going to bring him in to expose all of the deep, dark secrets of Twitter that, you know, the former liberal owners didn't want anyone to know about. It turned out to be a whole bunch of nothing. That wasn't really Schellenberger's fault. I had a bad taste in my mouth associated with that. But he has written a few pretty big articles after Grush's claims about this stuff. He was the one who previously claimed that his sources told him that the government has at least a dozen recovered UFOs in various conditions.
Yeah, and then Grush kind of verified that.
To kind of back this up, Ross Coulthart, Australian journalist who we like and put a lot of stock in, has been singing the praises of this article and said that he has heard most of the same claims from his own source. And interestingly, Ross was kind of clear on which parts he has not said. He's like, there are some things in here that I haven't said. He's like, this bit about successfully reverse engineering triangle-shaped craft, I haven't said that. Like,
yeah. All right. Well, I mean, if our favorite Aussie reporter is on board, that's pretty exciting. Any idea what they meant by collaboration?
I mean, I can tell you where my like UFO conspiracy brain goes. There have been persistent rumors for many, many years that the U.S. government signed a treaty with aliens agreeing that they could abduct a certain number of people per year in exchange for advanced technology. You know, put how much stock into this you want, but that is where my brain goes when I hear the word collaboration. You know, the implication is in some way we are working together with them, which takes this beyond a simple, there are aliens here and the government doesn't really know what to do about it, up to, in order to have collaboration, you have to have contact. what does contact look like? That's a pretty big story. So
yeah, right.
I don't know what it means is the short answer, but that's where my brain goes.
Cool.
All right, let's get to the meat of this episode, because I think the biggest thing that has happened over the past few weeks, and I'm going to guess here, the thing Chuck is most excited to talk about is NASA finally released their UAP study team report. We've talked about this a little bit. NASA put together an independent study team. That means these are not NASA researchers. These are scientists from the community who were going to kind of look at the current state of UFOs and UAPs and come back to NASA with recommendations for how, and, footnote, if NASA should be involved in the UAP conversation.
Yeah.
There was a bit of an expectation from the community that this was kind of going to validate some of the community's beliefs, that they were maybe going to chime in on UFO programs and David Grush and stuff. But I don't think that was realistic. They were pretty clear from the get-go that the output of this was going to be recommendations on what to do with UFOs going forward. Sure. And I'll let you talk about this, but the recommendations they make, I'm not mad about them. They're good. It's like with Kirkpatrick has been coming out and saying we need better data and we need formalized data collection processes. Yeah, absolutely. That's all great. I want all of that. But I want all of that, and I also want you to look at what we do have and not be dismissive of it. And Kirkpatrick has been a disappointment on that front. But I'm going to stop talking for a little bit. Chuck, you've read the report.
Hashtag let Chuck talk.
Hashtag let Chuck talk for real. This is certainly not our third attempt at recording this segment where I talked too much. Chuck, what did you think about the NASA report?
Yeah, well, you are absolutely right. This was the most interesting one to me. So I have some thoughts. I have some specific nits to pick. So starting with, I think, sentence 2 or something, which, whatever. So they said the panel finds that AI and machine learning are essential tools for identifying rare occurrences, potentially including UAP within vast data sets. However, these powerful techniques will only work on well-characterized data gathered with respect to strong standards. And, okay, so first off, I'm so tired of AI and ML being the answer to everything.
Well, if these guys are not from NASA, if they're out from, the private sector, they're probably used to, you got to use the current buzzwords to get your funding. If you want to get your startup funded, you better be in AI and machine learning.
Yeah, for sure. So my second complaint is, how are they going to get well-characterized data of things they claim we haven't seen before? I don't understand.
All these anomalies in our data. I don't know what to do about them.
Yeah. So that, I don't know. That's just a gripe about our industry. But I know that NASA does actually have experience using AI/ML for this kind of stuff. I have been to several talks and read a couple papers about how they do it. And it is actually more compelling than most of what our industry talks about.
Yeah, totally. It's worth pointing out to any listeners who are not super familiar with this. In the tech industry, machine learning and AI have become kind of synonymous, bullshit terms that just mean magic. But in the world of science, machine learning is actually a really good technique for, previously, if you were looking for pulsars, you needed to examine 70 years of photographs of stars and by hand compare all of them and figure out, in plate 37B, this pixel didn't move. And, that's the kind of stuff that machine learning is really, really good at. So it's not quite as silly as our industry makes it sound to say we're going to bring machine learning to it. This is actually a great fit for, I have a big pile of data. Tell me what's weird about it.
Yeah, right. So I don't know if you've done this, but they have this really cool citizen science portal. where their ML has identified 2 images of exactly the same spot in the sky, but there's some anomaly in there. And they don't know if it's just a JPEG artifact or whatever. I don't think JPEG, but, some sort of artifact. Or
I would hope NASA's not storing
right?
everything as JPEGs.
Lossy JPEGs, yeah. It's probably like sensor noise or whatever. But but if it isn't just sensor noise, it could be like a body moving through the sky. And humans are pretty good at detecting that. Machines are good at putting up the 2 that are like, hey, these 2 are weird. I love that. So that's one of the things they talk about in this report about building a new citizen science app. They also talk about using their reputation to reduce stigma. Hell yeah. And they are looking at using the aviation safety reporting system as a means to collect other kinds of reports, like UAP reports. These all seem like great competencies that NASA brings to the table that AARO doesn't have and probably shouldn't develop.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's worth noting here that Kirkpatrick was interviewed about like what he sees as AARO's responsibility. And one of the things that was most interesting about it is he views AARO's ultimate responsibility as dissolving itself. Eventually, there will not be a need for a UAP specific department because all of the other departments will have processes to handle this stuff. When a civilian pilot or an astronaut or a military pilot sees something unusual, there are standardized reporting mechanisms that all feed into a central repository. And it shouldn't be, oh, go tell AARO about it. It should be, that goes in the database. And once you've got that database, it's well characterized, all this stuff NASA's talking about comes in.
Are you trying to tell me that AARO is actually being effective right now?
I mean, here's the thing. I'm not mad at any of the recommendations that either NASA or AARO have made in this regard. I 100% agree that we should have better data collection. Like we've talked before about, like, the problem here is no one is in denial anymore that there's weird stuff flying around in the sky. Not everybody's prepared to come with me on, they're aliens, but there's stuff up there. And the military's current policy of shutting their eyes and pretending it doesn't exist is like terrifyingly stupid. Like that is, if I had not already lost all faith in the government's ability to protect me, that would have been the thing that did it. There's stuff up there and you don't know what it is, so you're just going to pretend it's not there? What the hell? So yes, absolutely. We're going to gather data so that we can properly investigate it is an excellent, excellent first step. I have no objection to it. I have an objection to Kirkpatrick, and we'll talk about this a little later, NASA's kind of dismissiveness towards anything that doesn't meet this kind of like high theoretical purity of what a scientist considers data, and especially their willingness to dismiss eyewitness reports entirely.
Right. Yeah. So what's interesting here to me is with regards to like critical investigation of UAP reports, since AARO is operating with zero transparency, it seems to me like the most viable mechanism for most people to actually engage and get critical discourse is literally a link on the UFOs subreddit to report a sighting. Like that is unacceptable on so many levels.
100% agree. Yeah.
So I think since NASA's not just transparent, they're required by law to report any data they obtain. So NASA doing a citizen science initiative represents a major fucking change, I think. I'm
not mad about that.
Yeah. One of the funny things about the James Webb Telescope is that scientists are kind of annoyed because the data goes up on the archive very quickly. and Redditors are often like processing the telescope imagery from Webb weeks before the scientists do. And like on the one hand, that's amazing, but sometimes they fuck it up so bad. And and by the time the trained scientists do it right, the media is like, yeah, whatever. So I'm excited to see that kind of thing applied to UAP.
Absolutely. Bringing a bit more rigor to data collection in particular, I'm all in favor of. Makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, so to get back to kind of my main objection here, it's not the recommendations of the report. This, like I said at the beginning, this was the purpose of the report. It was not to pass judgment on UAP. It was to recommend to NASA, here's what you should do about UAP moving forward. And all their recommendations are totally reasonable, make perfect sense. Yeah, absolutely. NASA is well positioned to do a lot of this stuff, and they should be. There is a dismissive, condescending tone kind of throughout this, though, of it, kind of the best way I can put it is like, okay, calm down, everyone. The grown-ups are here. You know, like, I know all you like politicians have gotten really excited about aliens in our airspace, but like, you know, like, it's okay. You know, like, you know, the devotees of Carl Sagan are here to tell everyone it's okay. And everything has an explanation. We'll talk a little bit more about this when we dive into the report, but even in the press conference, NASA Director Bill Nelson said the purpose of the study team was to help shift UAP dialogue from sensationalism to science. And then Nicola Fox, who is the Associate Director of NASA's Science Mission Directorate, wow, that is a mouthful of job title, said, UAP are one of our planet's greatest mysteries, and it's really due to the limited number of high-quality data. The language of scientists is data.
Yeah, it's all right. I get it. It's a bit of a snooty response. Like, the language of science is data. But I have seen the value of good data at work, and I kind of don't think we have that. If NASA can use its extensive collection of satellites and whatnot, I'll allow a little snoot.
Yeah. We'll talk about it more. There's a through line here, but okay. So let's talk about the report itself. I've got one quote here that I think kind of summarized the whole report that I don't disagree with. When it comes to UAP, the challenge we have is that the data needed to explain these anomalous sightings often do not exist. We've heard the same thing from Sean Kirkpatrick talking about, I've got, hours of videotape and it's all low quality, blurry VHS stuff from the 90s. What am I supposed to do with this, right?
Release it?
Well, yeah, there is that. The report goes on. This includes eyewitness reports, which on their own can be interesting and compelling, but are not reproducible and usually lack the information needed to make any definitive conclusions about a phenomenon's provenance. Okay. There is an assumption baked right into this sentence that does bug me. Repeatability. I get repeatability is an important part of scientific experiments, but it's not necessarily the way that you observe weird phenomena. Like, this is why we had things like scientists didn't believe that ball lightning or mega waves existed for a long time because people would tell them about it. They're like, yeah, but that doesn't exist. So like there's an unwillingness to consider unusual. What is it? The principle of mundanity. I think that's how it is. It came up. There was a shift in science, because it used to be we were God's chosen ones, right? The sun revolves around the earth and everything in the universe was built to support humans. And then when we discovered there were other planets, other galaxies, other solar systems, the belief in science shifted to a much more reasonable belief that actually there's nothing particularly unique about the Earth. The Earth is an example of something that, to the best of our knowledge, happens all over the place. So the idea that we are kind of mundane, we are not extraordinary, excellent things.
Right.
But the problem is that belief is kind of bled into all of science to the point where anything unusual that happens, we're much more likely to lean towards a mundane explanation, right? Like,
some bias
swamp gas, weather balloons, because admitting that it might be extreme is going to get you looked at funny in the scientific community. Sorry, I'm doing it again. I'm getting derailed and talking about how mad it makes.
All right,
again,
we're still right here.
So, the eyewitness reports aren't reproducible. They usually lack the information needed to make any definitive conclusions about a phenomenon's provenance. Analysis of UAP data is hampered by poor sensor calibration, the lack of multiple measurements, the lack of sensor metadata, and the lack of baseline data. Making a concerted effort to improve all aspects is vital, and NASA's expertise should be comprehensively leveraged as part of a robust and systematic data acquisition strategy within the whole of government framework.
Hell yeah. Sounds like they need Project Galileo, right?
Yeah, right? Yeah, I'm sure Avi Loeb would be very happy to hook them up with a sensor suite at a low price.
And since they're best friends with Sean Kirkpatrick.
So yeah, as irritated as I am by bits of this and the tone, again, this recommendation that scientists are saying we don't have good data, so we should get good data. I'm on board. Go record more data, please. Set up more sensor platforms, set up standard reporting requirements. One thing I thought was really interesting was they said that we need better baseline data, right? If you're only looking at the anomalies, it's hard to tell what's special about them. So they need more footage of, what does a regular plane look like through a FLIR camera so we can compare and contrast it. This is the kind of work that Sean Kirkpatrick's doing that I'm not mad about. People should be doing this.
Yeah, totally.
They also talk about decreasing negative stigma around UAP reporting. This is, again, a thing we've been hearing repeatedly. Navy pilots, Air Force pilots are pressured to not repeat because you might lose your pilot's license, you might lose assignments, they might ground you. In that world, it's hard to get good data. So reducing stigma, as you pointed out, literally just attaching NASA's name to it brings a degree of credibility in, whether it's earned or not. Just the fact that NASA is looking at it is like, oh, NASA's looking at it. Okay. Using AI or machine learning. We talked about that. And they suggest crowdsourcing data collection, like you said. I will say my one nitpick about that is just like you said with the James Webb Space Telescope, right? Hey, anyone can process those images. And it's true. Instructions are available online. You can go download the raw data and process it.
Super fun.
But I don't understand how more cell phone videos is gonna help the data set here, right? This feels to me like it's more aimed at military and government and pilots and things like that, and that's fine. I get it. Those are qualified sources. So I'm a little skeptical, and I'm curious about how civilians would get more involved in this.
So my wife and I did some citizen science on river studies in Oregon. And it was super duper interesting to do that. So they had us go out to these locations and find whatever river or stream at some GPS coordinate and take a photo of it, which doesn't seem that interesting. But then it guided us through, 30 or 40 other things to talk about in that area. They had us take photos of how tall the trees were around, how much tree cover there was, whether we saw animals, the soil in the river, what the river was shaped like. And so I think when you hear citizen science, don't think a video. Think about there was that video from LA or from Vegas recently that people are pretty confident turned out to be a Mylar balloon. A citizen science report would include, hey, we're in Vegas. there's a big party going on nearby. That kind of thing, to sort of help correlate. That's what I'm hoping they're talking about.
That makes a lot of sense. And when you put it that way, it's not just, hey, I recorded a cell phone video. It's both the reporting mechanism and maybe even the app they release is designed to get you to do it. A related example, my wife had a fender bender recently, and as part of the reporting process, you can do the whole thing on your phone now. They have you go out and take photos of the car. But they don't just say, point your camera at the car and get a good photo. They pull up your cell phone camera, they know the make and model of your car, and they paint an outline of the car.
Oh, interesting.
So that you can line up the photo from the angle they want. And they have you do it from like 9 different points around the car. And it's almost impossible to mess it up because it's very clear, like, put your camera here and get the car lined up like this. So maybe there's something to this. I was a little skeptical of this idea of like, let's get a bunch of civilians in, but you've sold me on that. That could be good.
Cool. Yeah.
So the report itself, there's one last thing about it that really bothers me. So like I said, if you just read the text of the report, I'm not mad at most of what it says. Most of what it says is, we need better data, and here's how NASA could be well positioned to help gather it. It's mostly reasonable points that they are making throughout the report. I'm a little irritated that they act as if this is a brand new phenomena that's sprung up overnight, and like we've never done any research into it, and it's not like NASA has been around taking photos of everything for 70 years. But if you are going to start from the premise of starting today, how would you go about it? The recommendations they make are very good. I mentioned before, there was kind of this condescending, like, don't worry, kids, the grown-ups are here. So I'm a designer, right? The way that you present something tells a lot about how the presenter feels about their audience. This report has a bunch of great high quality photography in it. All of the photography is of unusual atmospheric phenomena, right?
Sure.
It opens with this photo of this weird red lightning. Then there's a photo of the aurora borealis taken from space. There is, I'm not fucking kidding, a photo of a goddamn weather balloon in here. Now, you would think, hey, this is a report on UAP. What is all the imagery of? Well, it's all things that are easily explainable, but have historically maybe been mistaken. There's a clear implication here. And it's not even an implication. In the opening paragraphs of it, they say explicitly, all UAP are explainable. It drives me crazy. But so there's a clear implication here that anybody who thinks these things are alien, they're just not very smart. They just aren't privy to the information we have. Oh, well, I get why you would think that was a UFO, but it's actually this really weird cloud formation that's only been seen twice in Antarctica, and today it's over Seattle for some reason. Were there any photos of UAP in the report? Sure. There were 3 photos of UAP, all of which were teeny, teeny, tiny. All the other photos in the report are full page, full bleed, glossy photos. The UAP photos are, I'm not even joking, like 10% of the width of the page. They're bigger photos that I have seen before when Sean Kirkpatrick released them, and they've cropped them down to only show the blurry shape that is arguably a UAP. And all of them are the ones that Sean Kirkpatrick has already debunked. They don't include any of the ones that have not been explained, with the exception of they include one shot of the weird orb in Iraq. But we've talked before how this is the one that I think scientists are most excited about because it's the one that's most likely to have a terrestrial explanation, even though it's still really freaking weird. But here's a report on UAPs, and they don't talk about UAPs. They don't
Right.
show any UAPs. They don't explain why anybody would be interested in studying them. There's no context for it. It's just taken as a given, like, well, other people are interested. But if a serious scientist were to look at it, here's how we would go about it. It just felt really condescending to me, and it really rubbed me the wrong way.
So my perspective on it is that the UFOs subreddit may not be the target audience of the report.
Fair.
If you want to get a bunch of scientists excited, show them new science. Like the one of the first photos is like a beautiful photo of red sprites that was on This Week at NASA recently, and represents an anomalous phenomenon that really only started making waves like 2 years ago, something like that. And so I think, to me, it's like, all right, let the scientists go on thinking that they're just there to find new science. And when they stumble into aliens, whatever. Worst case, we get new science. Best case, we find aliens.
Yeah. You're not wrong. It makes me mad to admit that, but you're not wrong. If your goal is to try to get the unconvinced Neil deGrasse Tyson crowd to consider this as a serious thing, this is the right way to go about it. But it just bothers me. Like, we are beyond this point. And the fact that they feel like the only way to get anyone to take it seriously is to water it down this much really bugs me. But you make a really excellent point. Reddit and me, frankly, are not the target audience for this. You're totally right. So let's talk about, real briefly, the press conference and the reactions to this, because that's where I think things started to get interesting. The press conference was whatever. There was a moment where a reporter asked Bill Nelson about David Grush, and his response was, well, I don't know anything about him other than what I saw in the news, but my understanding is it was just something his friend saw, and I don't know, we should probably get some actual data. And like, bro, like, how can you come to have a press conference on UAP and be this ill-informed about the current state? Anyway. This is the kind of attitude and the kind of tone that really bothered me. Like, again, the grown-ups are here. Like, okay, David Grush, sure. Anyway, here's how we're going to put strap sensors onto every telescope on Earth. But there was another really weird moment. So they announced one of the recommendations of the report was to appoint a director of UAP research at NASA. Hey, that's great. Right. Yeah. I'm excited about this. This, more than the report, sends a clear signal that UAP is something that NASA considers worth paying attention to the point that they are appointing a director to look into it. Now, who knows what they will do or how much funding they'll have, but it is still a clear signal. They would not announce who this person was.
Oh,
and it was not, hey, we're going to form this position. They were like, we have hired this person. And everybody's like, great, what's their name? They're like, we're not sharing that today.
Wow. Okay. That's weird.
It's super weird, right? Ross Coulthard and Bryce Zabel from the excellent Need to Know podcast were going off about this. There was a strong implication at the press conference that they were not announcing this person's name to protect them from all the UFO crazies, right? Okay. One of the reporters actually is like, my inbox is full of Area 51 emails. I'm assuming you're not announcing this person to protect them. Like the reporter just handed it to them on a silver platter. But here's the thing. In the report itself, it talks about, in the section about stigma, it talks about the negative reactions that the members of the study team themselves experienced, including hate mail, threats, like all that kind of stuff. The report makes it very clear the source of these negative reactions was not the UFO community, the crazies on Reddit. It was their peers in the scientific community. Like, people were so upset that any scientist would take this seriously.
Okay.
And I get why that's in the report, right? This is the stigma that they need to overcome. And you made an excellent point just a few minutes ago that, hey, this is how you would write a report if you were trying to convince other scientists that this was legitimate science. So totally. But again, hey, we're not going to announce this person and strongly imply it's because of the public when actually it's other scientists that you have to worry about. Like, so frustrating.
So who is the new director? Did they ever announce it?
They did. And full disclosure here, I did not put this person's name in the notes. I didn't bother to look them up. Chuck did, because he's our NASA nerd. But he put my name in front of this. So I'll get the glory.
So you have to read it now?
I'm giving the credit to Chuck.
Okay.
Dude's name is Mark McKierney. McKierney previously served as NASA's liaison to the Department of Defense. Makes sense. This guy's going to have to work with AARO. Since 96, he has served in various positions at Goddard Space Flight Center, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, and the National Hurricane Center. So this dude's big on satellite surveillance, coordination with government, sharing information with the public. That all makes sense.
This is, I have to say, I'm a little disappointed. Liaison to the DoD. This feels like maybe another Kirkpatrick. And I was so excited 100%. Just a couple minutes ago.
Yeah. No, I mean, here's the thing, right? I mentioned this at the top. Nothing about this is surprising if you have been paying any attention to Sean Kirkpatrick. Kirkpatrick laid the blueprint for how do serious people deal with this bullshit topic. There is an air of resentment to it. Like, yeah, okay, this is ridiculous, but I guess if you're going to tell me that I should analyze, videos of weird things, I guess here's how I would set up an investigative body. And okay, you tell me I need to tell you what they are. Well, I tell you we need more data to do that. And here's how you would go, like begrudgingly following through.
Yeah.
It is no surprise to me that NASA is following in Kirkpatrick's footsteps here. Like I said, I'm kind of annoyed at the condescending tone, but I would rather see them do this than do nothing, which is what they've been doing for 70 years.
Yeah, right.
Speaking of Ross Coulthart, were we speaking of Ross Coulthart? Oh, yeah, we were a minute ago. Sorry, because you injected the part about the dude's name. I lost my thread. Speaking of Ross Coulthart, he was super pissed about a bit of sleight of hand that lent the report a little more credibility than it perhaps deserves. So this is all a quote from Ross Coulthart. I'm not going to do the Australian accent, but I'll try to get the intensity that he brings to this.
Okay.
They specifically state, to date, in the peer-reviewed scientific literature, there is no conclusive evidence suggesting an extraterrestrial origin for UAPs. So the overwhelming impression is that NASA's panel was speaking on the basis of a review of all of the evidence that NASA has acquired in its long history, the videos from shuttle missions, the anomalous objects seen on the Apollo missions and reported by astronauts. And that's not true. There's an admission here. They only reviewed peer-reviewed scientific literature. Why?
Yeah. I strongly doubt they're trying to conceal it, but I have more thoughts on this that are in my notes later, so I'm going to leave it for that.
Yeah, I don't think they were being malicious about it, but it's super frustrating. If you were going to take the stance, this is all new, we're not going to talk about history, just say that.
Yeah.
But if you're going to only consider peer-reviewed scientific literature, well, that must have taken about 5 minutes. There's not a lot out there on this topic, which was kind of the point of your report. So, a little disingenuous to say, oh, yeah, we looked at both of the papers written on the topic and there's no evidence.
By Tim Bob and Joe Hassey.
Right? Oh, my God. Mark Rodiger, director of the J. Allen Center for UFO Studies, said, this is a good quote. It's good when it opens like this.
Yeah.
I won't use a word as strong as foolish.
Is it that strong? Okay, carry on.
But I think it's misguided to pretend like we're starting today from scratch rather than take advantage of what has been done. And he then has a little aside where he talks about all the things that the J. Allen Center for UFO Studies has done, all the studies they've done, the papers they've published, etc., which he says it's very clear NASA did not look at. He says, did I find it odd? No. My God, I totally got lost in my notes. We're starting today from scratch rather than take advantage of what's been done. In any science, you use as much data as you have. You don't ignore data, even if it's poor quality. You certainly take that into account in your work, but you don't pretend like it doesn't exist and say, we're only going to use new data. And we've talked about this before. The same thing Kirkpatrick is saying.
Yeah, it's super odd to me. The number of times NASA scientists have reflected back on previous data and found supporting evidence, like the red sprites that I mentioned earlier. They looked back after they kind of got a really good photo of it. It had been rumored for 100 years, but they finally looked back through all the footage from ISS and found one accidental photo from 1989. But we really have only gotten photos of it in the last 2 years, which is pretty nuts.
Yeah. And I mean, this is the kind of thing I'm talking about, right? That this principle of mundanity means that you start from an assumption that anything anomalous must be a mistake.
Right. Yeah, it's definitely a cognitive bias, I think.
Yeah.
So the only counterpoint I have here is we know that astrophysicists in particular do this a lot. But the counterpoint is that the data they're going back through is often peer reviewed and was produced by the finest instruments known to mankind,
right.
Or humankind. So that is a little different than eyewitness testimony or even video and sensor data.
I don't fault Kirkpatrick for saying, hey, what am I supposed to do with a blurry cell phone video?
Yeah, right.
I get it. I have no idea where I would begin if I was tasked with investigating it and this was what I have. But the problem with Kirkpatrick is not that he's saying, hey, these blurry cell phone videos are insufficient. The problem is he has eyewitnesses to U.S. government programs coming to him, telling him this program exists in this building. We have this material. I worked there. I can take you to the front door. And then he goes to Congress and says, I have no evidence because, as he explained, eyewitness testimony does not qualify as scientific evidence.
Right.
That is a line in the sand that frustrates me to no end. And it looks like NASA's doing the same thing. Right. I get they're a data-driven organization. Scientists are all about data. I get it. I clearly want them to do more going forward. It's just that willingness to be so dismissive that really bugs me.
So I have an answer to what he should do with grainy video footage. Just fucking release it. Let's do more peer review, right? If it's so grainy that you can't tell what's happening, clearly this is not a security issue. Let's just get it out there.
Yeah. Well, and I think his fear is if they put out videos that they can't explain, that people will think that there's something to it.
I mean, I don't know. Call it the X-Files. I don't care.
Oh my God. Yeah, totally. But this is because you and I are operating from a presumption of we want to see what's going on. We assume there is something, and he's operating from the assumption of all of this is explainable. Anything, any unexplained sightings are embarrassing because you have not yet explained them, rather than because they are unexplainable. To these guys, anything you haven't explained, it reflects poorly on you.
Yeah. My therapist is all on me about this recently. Failure is not the opposite of success; it's the precursor.
Right? Yeah.
Okay, fine.
All right. So I have spent 40 minutes railing on NASA and Dr. Kirkpatrick. I want to be clear. I've said this repeatedly. I'm in favor of their recommendations. I think they're good recommendations. I'm just annoyed at the side of condescension that came with it.
Yeah,
but
right.
if it gets us moving forward, like you said, if this is what it takes to convince quote unquote legitimate scientists to look at the topic, and then they're like, whoa, hey guys, did you know there's something weird going on? I'll take it. But as usual, anytime any of us get really upset about this stuff, our first, oldest, and greatest fan of the podcast, Chris Mellon, former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Intelligence, has been trying to chill the UFO community the fuck out. And he posted on Twitter, "When I set out on this journey, the goal was to get our government to take the UAP issue seriously and investigate appropriately. Now, in just 5 years, we have Congress, the DoD, and NASA fully engaged. This is a huge achievement."
Wow. Yeah. Good old hashtag UFO daddy.
Yep.
Keeping us grounded.
Yep. It's a good reminder. I put this last for a reason, as annoyed as I get at any given moment with the pace of progress, it is impossible to deny the progress. I was commenting to you before we started recording, the Customs and Border Patrol videos that we just breezed past in the first 30 seconds of this episode. That would have been months of content in the before times. 2 years ago, we would have been, the UFO community would have been jealously hoarding that and analyzing it and thinking about it for months. And now it's like a footnote, yeah, we got some shitty videos. Let's go talk about this other stuff.
Let's keep going.
We've been recording for almost 2 hours now. And this is just a few weeks of stuff. So we are living in very good times for people who are interested in the UFO topic. We have made incredible progress in 5 years, and I need to kind of center myself, do my deep breathing, remind myself, as Chuck said, this report was not for me.
Yeah.
And content myself with the fact that we are taking bold strides forward.
Heck yeah. It's a very exciting time.
So, Chuck, it is October 1st. I don't know if you remember this exactly, but we launched this podcast on October 31st, 1 year ago.
No way.
Yeah, so we're coming up on our 1 year anniversary.
I mean, technically that's 11 months ago. Not to be pedantic.
No, I know it's not today, but we're approaching it. But thank you for being my pedantic friend.
Always.
But, yeah, man, we'll probably do a show around then and we'll talk about it. But we've joked about how we need to re-record the intro because you're no longer the tolerant friend. You're now just fully on the ride with me. How are you feeling, man? We got, Chris Mellon reminding us the progress you make. I'm trying to kind of center myself. How do you feel?
I don't know. There's a lot of exciting stuff happening. I am happy by the NASA report. I know you were a little more dismissive, or more frustrated by it, but the NASA report was written for me. So, you've said, I'm fully on board, but really, I'm still fully on board with that NASA report more. I do think that there's going to be mundane,
100%
explanations for almost everything, and if it turns out any of it is true, then woo. But so yeah, I don't know. There's some good stuff this week. I'm excited by how much is going on. I'm excited to hear more about all those other whistleblowers, and I'm also excited to find out why NASA ripped the study off of their website, and all the drama that unfolds from that.
Oh yeah, I didn't even mention that. I sat down to do the notes, And like everyone was talking about this for a straight week.
Yeah.
Yesterday, I sit down, I click the link to go read the actual NASA report, and it's a 404. It's no longer on their website. And like I tried searching for it, it's just been pulled down. I had to look it up on archive.org. Thank you, archive.org, by the way. Great website.
Send donations.
Send donations. But yeah, that's a funny little moment. I gotta assume that's just an administrative mess up. Someone accidentally took it down. It's too funny to think that like after a week they're like, never mind.
No, man, I think we're gonna find some drama there. I'm excited.
Well, where's my gif of Representative Burchett? It's a cover up.
It's a cover up.
It's a cover up. All right. Thank you all for joining us on It's a Very Exciting Time. You can find show notes and more on our website, veryexcitingtime.com, as well as links to our social media accounts.
Feel free to email us at Scott or Chuck at veryexcitingtime.com. And if you'd like to support the show, please check out our Patreon at patreon.com/veryexcitingtime.
And Chuck, as always, my wife thanks you for listening to me talk about UFOs so she doesn't have to.